Welcome, everyone, to Refreshing Educators with Dr. Chelsea Foster, where we are educating lifelong learners of today with the wisdom of yesterday. This is interview number 2 of Hidden Figures in Education with Mrs. Winnifred Sudler. She's a lifelong educator, and it is a privilege to have her speak to us today about her journey as an educator and her 38 years. Yes, 38 years in education. So Mrs. Sudler, welcome.
Hello, how's everyone? It's good to meet you, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining us. This is exciting to be able to just hear an account of your experiences and your journey. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us, well, first off, I just want to say it's an honor as a BWE Sister Black Women Educators Alliance to have known you, to glean from you, to hear your story, to get your wisdom, your insight. You're always present for every meeting and just available so that the next generation is able to have success based upon what you and many others have laid down as a foundation. We'd like to know a little bit about you as an educator. What did you teach? Just take us back to the beginning. When did you first start teaching?
I think I first started, let's see, in the 30s.
1952.
1952.
Philadelphia School District. Philadelphia School District.
I have it here on the paper. So wait just a minute.
Oh, that's all right. So let's take us back, because I learned so much about you just from our interviews and our pre-interviews. And just one, you were born in 1924. That's so significant, right after women had the right to vote. So, you know, this generation coming up, some of them are born just after we had our first Black president, but you were 4 years after women had the right to vote. And I also have in my notes that you were in Philadelphia first, and your family moved to Crestmont, Abington?
No, I was born in Philadelphia at the line. I know the hospital's is burned down now, but in Philadelphia, but I was raised by my mother's sister. She was the only Black family, I think at that time, in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. And that's where I was raised by the Jones family in Fort Washington. They were founders there, and they had about 2 acres in Fort Washington, and they had 6 children of their own. And I was the youngest in the family. And they raised my sister and myself in Fort Washington. So
you said they were founders. I know you were talking about founders with the 2 churches.
There's here in Crestmont, Willow Grove.
Yes.
But I wasn't with them at that time. I was with them later.
But you have great history. So Crestmont Baptist and also First Baptist Church of Crestmont, 2 churches there.
Yes, those
that at the time there was an all-Black school.
So we were living here in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. The family, my uncle had bought 2 acres, so he had a farm, and they were the only Black family around. So I was raised with my 6 cousins, and we all went to the Fort Washington Public School in Fort Washington, of course.
Depression, you moved.
In Fort Washington, Upper Dublin.
And yes. And then there came in 1930, the Depression, and my uncle had a home in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, and the section that he moved to started this section called Crestmont, Pennsylvania, Willow Grove, right near
So they
Willow Grove.
actually moved from Fort Washington to Crestmont during the Depression, 1929. So sometime in 1930, you said they moved, but following the Depression.
But for some reason, they had this land over in Fort Washington. My uncle did, and I was the youngest in the family. They had 6 cousins, and they were all older. And I grew up as the youngest child in the family in Fort Washington public schools. And then when
Depression.
then Depression came in 1930, I know that. And he lost his houses, that's right, when Depression came. And we all moved with his oldest daughter in her home she had bought in a new section that Richard Jones had started. And I was raised by Richard Jones and his wife with my 6 cousins here in Willow Grove. And it was called Abington Township at the time. And that's where I grew up. And I also taught in Abington Township when I grew up for 38 years.
Now, at what point had you met your husband?
The town that I'm talking about is part of Abington Township, and it's a large Black section in Willow Grove at that time. It was becoming, and that's what it had became. And I was the youngest in the household of my 6 cousins, and he had 2 acres of land. So I grew up in Fort Washington and went to the public schools. But
So,
they
Mr.
all
Sudler, if I could
moved.
ask you, at what point had you met your husband?
Yes. Tell about that.
When I moved to this section, it's called, if the school was called Park School, but Abington Township had an all-Black school in Abington, and that's the school in 6th grade that I went from the 6th grade to the junior high in Abington Township and the high school.
So you met him when you were in 6th grade
Yes.
at the junior high?
Yes, I met my husband in the 6th grade, and he lived in this, there's a neighborhood, a town here that we were raised in called Crestmont, Willow Grove. And it's been here all of these years.
Since 1908.
Since 1908, Crestmont, Willow Grove has been here. And this is where I went to the Abington schools because it's part of Crestmont.
Now, I have down in my notes, 1943 was when you graduated from Abington High School. And,
Yes.
I just want to note, I love that a timeline to find parallelisms where
All right.
1942 was the beginning of World War II. And we know that many people were off, particularly our men were off into other countries, but you were just graduating high school the following year in the middle of that when many people were away.
Yeah. My husband I married a neighborhood boy, and my husband was from up the street. He was a neighborhood person that I married, Alonzo Sudler, who became the director of Abington Pharmacy and was the first African-American in Abington Hospital.
That is awesome. So he was the first African-American in Abington Hospital and later became the director of the pharmacy there.
Yeah, he became the director.
1951.
In 1951, he was director of Abington Hospital.
And the first.
Now, following high school.
First Black there too.
Following high school.
The first one?
the first black he was the first black that Abington Hospital had ever hired. He had to go 3 times to be employed, and they didn't employ him. And he decided that I'm going to work here. And Alonzo Sudler became director of the place that he decided to work, Abington Memorial Hospital. It's a very big hospital.
Yes.
Jamie.
I wanted to note also, so after high school, what college did you attend?
I attended, I worked 2 years where the jobs I could find. And then I attended Abington School District.
No, Jamie.
I attended Cheney State Teachers College when it was the first time. It was the 4-year college by that time. So I attend, and the problem was, where will you work after you graduate as a teacher? Because they weren't hiring teachers. But my husband was very active, was director of the pharmacy in Abington Hospital. And they said, well, if you're a teacher, why would you go to Philadelphia? Why not work for us? And that's how I was hired in Abington Hospital as one of their first black teachers.
No, not
For
hospital.
the Abington School District.
At school district, I'm sorry.
So during the years that you were in college was during the war, World War II.
Yes,
Not like
there weren't many males in the college. That I remember that part. It used to be started as an all-girls school. Yes. But when I went there, it was a 4-year college. It just become the state teachers college of the 14 that exist in Pennsylvania.
I know that many of the teachers college or state colleges in Pennsylvania started as normal schools for teachers.
Yeah. They were normal schools, but when I was hired, it was a 4-year college.
That is a wonderful part of history to be a part of. I wanted to also note, so by 1951, you were married, and then you went to work for Philadelphia School District in 52. And then after that was when you were mentioning that you had spoken with people in Abington School District where you grew up.
Yes.
Lived, and they said that you should be teaching in Abington. But at the time, they really hadn't hired people of color at that point.
Right. My husband had been
School.
What'd you say?
School district, not that.
The school.
It's fine.
My husband was director of the pharmacy at Abington Hospital. So he was the first black they had. And then he was telling them I needed a job. They said, why would she go to Philadelphia when we have a hospital here?
Schools.
We have a school here. So I was hired by Abington School District.
And you went to Cedar Road.
And but I attended
Taught.
I attended I taught at the all-white school when I was hired. And that was the first one that they had ever thought of a black person coming on that side of Abington Township. So
when you attended Park Elementary, did you have black teachers in your school?
Let's see. Yes, when I first started, and then I'm just trying to think. Yes, I had black teachers. Yes, I never remembered their names. And Abington Township had black teachers in this black town called Crestmont, Pennsylvania.
So the Black teachers were only in that one school, but when you were hired, so what you were saying is that you were actually hired to be in a predominantly white school.
Yes. Yes.
So that was very much a change. You were very
I,
groundbreaker in that time.
I was a groundbreaker.
Yeah.
And in the all-white school, and I felt very comfortable because I was raised in Fort Washington, and there weren't any African Americans living near the aunt and uncle who were raising me in Fort Washington.
So you first at Cedar Road Elementary School in Rydell, or it's also part Hollywood, Pennsylvania.
That's right, and I was their first Black teacher.
What was that experience like, being the first Black teacher there?
I seem to have grown up in a white world, so I didn't. I just felt, I've always felt very comfortable in the white. I felt like I was in the white world because the family was in Fort Washington. We didn't have any Black neighbors, so all the children and everybody I knew were white. And I didn't feel any different because I just felt the whole world. I just happened, because yeah, I even had an incident in first grade. One little girl says, "Oh, look at your head." And I said, they said, "You've been in the sun a long time," the little girl said.
Really?
And I said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "There's nothing wrong with my hat." And she said, "But it's brown." I said, "Oh, I was born that way. All my relatives are brown." And when I went home, I found out that our one family up there in Fort Washington had been there for years. And my aunt and uncle who were raising me just said, "Oh, well, your mother was unable to take you." My mother's sister said, she couldn't take care of you and your sister, so I thought I'd bring you out here to Fort Washington. And I was raised in the Fort Washington and went to the Fort Washington School Board.
So you were in Cedar Road Elementary, and one of the first grade students noticed that you, as to say in her words, you were in the sun for a long time. She noticed that your skin was brown.
You mixed up things.
Oh, no, that was just when I was young, and the classmate said that, a 6-year-old class.
How was it for you with the other children or with the other parents or adults at that time? Were you well received?
Oh, at that time, I was received very well. At this, in fact, you could say it was the all-white section of Abington Township, and I was received very well. I never had any feeling about, they never mentioned color or. But when I went to Cedar Road, I went to the parent, I think some of the parent meetings, I forget a subject, I don't know what subject came up, and one of the male parents said, "Let Mrs. Sudler talk. After all, she's our new second grade teacher here in this section of Abington." So I don't know what I had to say.
I know that in an earlier conversation, you said that when you transitioned to the all-white school, that you were surprised because many of the PTO moms had a concern about you being there, and that there was a meeting about you being placed in the school, but the men actually stood up for you.
Yes, they did. And
men in the audience actually,
right after that man, made that comment, and I just sat there, and everything went smoothly in my teaching of at the Cedar Road School. but it did close when, I think, just before I retired. It didn't it? It's
1982.
getting my daughter to help me, and it closed. But some of the parents at some of the meetings, there were some of the mothers who had concern. The fathers were the males at the meetings would say, let Mrs. Sudler talk. After all, she's going to be our new teacher. And so I didn't have any problems in the Abington's section called Cedar Road.
So you were by yourself as an African-American educator for many years. And I think eventually over the years, Abington began to hire a few more African-Americans throughout the district, not necessarily just in your building, but
that's right. They had Black teachers, but that was for the Black section on the other side, of Abington
Park School. So now let's move later, where I believe the Black teachers started to come together, particularly the women.
Yes.
And started to become a support for one another. And I believe that you were a part of that. It was called Black Women's Educators Alliance.
Yes, we formed a union, and they had the first meeting in my home.
Montgomery County.
In Montgomery County.
Chapter.
And
so this was a chapter, I believe, had already started in Philadelphia in the late 1970s. And you had the first chapter in your home, the meeting for it in 1980 in for Montgomery County, Pennsylvania.
Yes. And everything has always gone smoothly, and it seemed to be fully accepted by all the parents. And I didn't. No one have had a more beautiful teaching career that I did, because I enjoyed both sections, and I was raised in a all-white community in Fort Washington, so I was more used to the white parents than I had until I moved to Crestmont, Willow Grove. It was a beautiful Black section of Abington Township.
So for the 38 years, and I still think about that, 38 years that you taught.
Yes.
That was quite, what did you mostly teach? What area, subject, or grade did you?
Elementary, and for 20 some years, I taught second grade at the Cedar Road Elementary School on the other side of Abington Township.
That is excellent. It's beautiful.
That was.
You were in Cedar Grove. You were also in Roslyn Elementary. I believe once it closed, it became Roslyn Elementary.
Yes, I was in
and later you transferred to Overlook.
Yes, Cedar Road closed, and I transferred to Overlook.
And hired from the district in 1992.
Yes. What happened in
so much from starting with the district in 1950 to leaving the district in the 1990s.
Oh, and what did I do? My daughter's helping me here. 1992. I've had a beautiful life. Why can't I remember it? What do you have there?
You're hired by Abington in 1964.
What did you say?
Okay, sorry.
So one of the things I just want to note is that during your time as
the amazing thing, I was hired by Abington Township in 1964,
Yes.
and they didn't have, and I was hired in an, okay, I won't repeat it. That's what it said. I already told you. I was hired in an
So-
all-white.
So from 1951, when you got married, at that point you were in Philadelphia, and by 1954, Abington had decided to bring you there.
Yes.
Or rather, you said your husband had decided. And supported many other neighbors and people had supported you being in Abington because you were an Abington resident, an Abington alum. And also during the 1960s and 70s, you were an amazing, remarkable woman at a time when it was challenging for many people of color to just go to college during that time, to have those opportunities. You were getting your master's degree.
In 19,
Somewhere in this, yeah.
I'm working on it.
At Temple.
At Temple University.
What did you say?
I said you were working on your master's degree at Temple University.
Yes, I did. But I had to commute. That's what it was. I was commuting.
You were
From
thinking
Willow-
about the traveling back and forth, but still quite an accomplishment when you think back in the 1960s and 70s.
Yeah, I had to travel back and forth I wasn't driving. So it was buses and
Well,
things.
we want to publicly thank you and honor you. You have given so much to Black Women Educators Alliance. Having that first meeting in 1980, and now here we are, the 2020s. I mean, literally think to even comprehend that now we're 40 years later. It's still strong because of the foundation that you and so many other women have laid. Thinking about the investment that your family has put into the churches in Abington, and that you are a member of Crestmont Baptist for so long, for so many years, a lifetime member of the Willow Grove NAACP, a lifetime member of the Montgomery County chapter of Cheyney University.
Yes, because I fully remember the NAACP. We had I started out in a teenage group in Crestmont Willow Grove. And so I've just, the NAACP seems like it's just part of my life, part of my family. And we had a strong branch. We had one of the largest branches in Montgomery County.
The Willow Grove branch.
The Willow Grove branch was the strongest and the largest of the suburban groups. I think we were the first one. And don't want to repeat it. What else do you want to know?
So I want to find out, refreshing educators, what can you share with us, a piece of wisdom, something that you would like to leave us with to encourage us as teachers, as educators, and educators into the next generation?
Mm.
What has been significant to you, or what has impacted you, a saying or scripture or something that you would share? Just a word of advice.
I can't think of it.
Well, one legacy we know has been in your daughter, that your daughter became an educator.
Yeah, yes.
That your
Yes, my
teacher also
daughter
Abington.
became an educator. And where did you start teaching?
And we'll let if Julie wants to show her face. She's more than welcome. We'd love to know that that one of the greatest things you've done is you have really inspired. Hi. You have inspired a legacy of education within your family.
Yes.
And
yes.
I actually want to ask Julie, is there something that your mom has shared with you, or something that you've heard her say or do over the years that you would want to leave with us?
I think it's really been by example more than anything. I'm not sure.
You
I
always wanted to be a teacher.
yeah, I've always wanted to be a teacher, I guess. I
And
can't remember the
it
earliest
could
age.
be because I was a teacher.
Yeah, and education was so important. Even my dad taught nurses pharmacy skill, courses and everything. So education has been extremely important in our lives. And so I just would say I can't say she had a word that she ever gave me or words, but I know
It
that
was natural.
I know that God is on our side. And I think that might be the words that I would even use. And we've just had such a good life, and we were exposed to many international people because we,
Every
as a family,
2 years.
yeah, as a family, we were host families through the International House at the University of Pennsylvania. So we were educated in that sense.
We had a different.
Then you grew up, and you always had people in your home, and your parents would always be a safe place for people to come, particularly people of color who were training to be in Abington.
No, these are actually people that were
Foreign language.
International, right? Yes.
Language, especially German and Spanish people would come to our home, and we'd have them for 2 years on the weekends, and they would stay at our homes, and we would learn about their system of education and became friends.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being an example to us, because I think that is the most important legacy you can leave, is to be a great example that we can go back to and learn from, and know that it's nice for me to know that I'm not the first in so many instances, and that there was a Mrs. Winnifred Sudler or Mrs. Winnifred Sudler, as affectionately known, who has been on this journey long before I came on this earth. And that it's so important that we honor that and honor all the things that you have brought. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the honor, and I'm just so happy of all the things that you're doing now, and everything that we wanted to be done. It seems like the new educators and all of you are carrying on the banner.
Well, thank you. And again, this closes another episode of Refreshing Educators, Hidden Figures in Education. And we just met with Mrs. Winnifred Sudler. Thank you, and stay subscribed to us with us.
Thank you so much. The honor is just wonderful.
Thank you.